Hey, it's great to join together for this year-end giving celebration. It's a party event, and we've changed kind of how we talk about this year to say it's a party. And that's something we used years ago because we love the idea of talking about celebrating how God is working and then talking about how we can invest. And I'm standing here today on the rooftop of our Kidsburg wing. And we've chosen this location in part because originally we had wanted to have everyone have a chance to come up here and walk through the new construction, and the construction should be starting and in a dangerous zone by the time you see this. But I'm here just a little ahead of that because I want to talk about this space and expanding on this space, what we've chosen to do here and what this project is about. You can hear the birds, you can hear the highway, the rumbling of the HVAC, and so it's all just part of the experience of being here. But 12 years ago, a group of us gathered, and not on this floor, not on the floor below where now Kidsburg is, but all the way below that, people took rocks and they wrote on these rocks names of people that were significant to them, people they were praying for, maybe their own kids. And then together we threw the rocks in to the space, and then the concrete was poured. So under the foundation of Kidsburg are all these rocks with names on them. And I threw one in that day. I threw one in, and then I made a second one that it was for me just to be on my desk. And on it I put the names of my 4 boys, who were all various ages in the Kidsburg program at the time. And I put it on my desk just to remind me to pray for my kids. And I've watched my kids grow up through this church and the kids ministry here. And it hasn't just been my kids. It's been hundreds, thousands of kids since then. In fact, over these 12 years, I did a quick estimate, and depending on exactly how you count number of people, but if you just said per year, there were over 2,500 kids that were served by this space. That would be nearly 30,000 kids who've come through, 25 to 30,000 kids who've been a part of what's happened here. But here's the thing. Those numbers are staggering, the individuals are staggering, but when you really think about what happens here, it's really something, because out there, if you look beyond Wexford, Pittsburgh, whatever's around us, there's a lot of narratives for kids these days. They're told that they're not enough, that they need to become sexually adventurous at a very young age. And who besides the church is telling them that there's a better way, that God's way is better? There's a movement to tell kids that their gender is fluid. And who besides the church is going to instruct the next generation with this truth that God created you and the way He created you as you are is beautiful? And then when I think about what's happened in this space beyond kids, I think about the addiction recovery groups that have met right below where I'm standing right now, where people have found freedom from addiction. And who besides the church will help people not just find their way through addiction, but find their way to the ultimate higher power? And I think about the marriages that have been rectified, salvaged in this space. And then I think about what's taken place if you look to this side, and maybe Josh will get a B-roll. But over here we have the worship center, and every month thousands and thousands of people come and hear about Jesus Christ. And as I was thinking about this and just this motif of it's a party, I was just thinking about these verses in Luke 15. And if you're not familiar with Luke 15, there's 3 stories that Jesus tells. And at the end of each of them, He says, and there's this rejoicing that happens. The first one is the parable of the lost sheep, and Jesus says this in verse 7, I tell you that in the same way there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over the 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent. And then the story of the lost coin, verse 10. He says, in the same way, I tell you, there will be rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. And then verse 32, after the story of the prodigal son, he says, but we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and he's alive again. What is lost has been found. Do you hear the rejoicing? This is why we have said we're going to celebrate and talk about investing, but celebrating because there's rejoicing. And here's what I imagine when I think about this space. Can you imagine 30,000 kids, addiction support, marriages, small groups, people being reached in different ways, that this has actually been a dance floor for angels as they've rejoiced over what God has done in this space? And we have no idea the ripple effects that go beyond what happens right here. And part of the project for Wexford this year is to finish this space. And you have given generously in past years, and so construction has begun, and we are ready now to build this space, but there's still a need, and there's some details in the printed material. You'll hear a little bit more about the details that talk about doing this space because our campus needs space for kids, for adults, for ministry. Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, this place is completely booked. Sunday mornings, there's not enough room down the hall for all of the kids who come. And so this space where we're standing will be built. And here's the thing about buildings. They're just tools. They're nothing more. There's nothing sacred about a building. I know in the Old Testament, there were times when the temple had a sacredness, and at one point in 1 Chronicles 29, when David was urging the people to give toward the construction of the temple, he talked about what a privilege it was. He says, but who am I? Verse 14, 1 Chronicles 29, and who are my people that we should be able to give this generously? He says, it's a privilege that God has given me resources that I can invest in something like this. And then he talks about investing, verse 15, for we are foreigners and strangers in your sight, as we all are ancestors. Our days on earth are like a shadow without hope. And so he's talking here about putting his earthly resource into something that goes beyond his life. And then he talks about the accountability of this in verse 16 and 17. And here's my point, is just that the money that is given toward this project or other projects, if you're at one of our campuses, you get to hear about your specific project, but I wanted you to see this as well, because part of what happens in the Strip District in Butler happens because of the investment here, and part of what will happen in future campuses is happening because of the investment that you're making in the Strip, in Butler, in Wexford, and wherever God has you right now. And the building is a tool that God uses for the next opportunity. And 12 years ago, when many of us took these rocks and threw them in, we had no idea that there would be a campus in Butler with hundreds of people. No idea that there would be a campus in the Strip District with hundreds of people. No idea that there would be a South Point and a Beaver. And what we give to today, we have no idea what God will do. And the numbers of lives that will be changed, because it's only the church that helps bring about life change. I got an email the other day from somebody, and this person said, hi, my name is, he said, hi Kurt, my name is blank. And he said, I am a 28-year-old professional living in New York City. I grew up with a very casual interpretation of faith in my home. But recently I found my way to your podcast through Orchard Hill on Spotify by a recommendation of a friend. I think we often talk about what it means to fill the void in one's life. And eventually we landed on the idea that this is truly a space that existed and is filled by God's Spirit. Right now, your online sermons and podcasts are my version of church. I noticed that you periodically cite Tim Keller, and he said in your interpretations, and he's someone I've looked to as I've explored my journey of faith. This is a bit of a bizarre question, but because I can't attend Orchard Hill in person since I live in Manhattan, I wanted to experiment with going to a similar style church. Could you recommend one to me? And I just share this because this for me was one of those cool moments where I realized that there are so many things happening because of the investments that you're making, and they're everywhere around us. And so I want to thank you for participating, for investing, and encourage you once again this year just to ask God how you can invest personally in what God is doing in and through Orchard Hill. It's a beautiful thing that we get to be a part of. And I know that if you will invest in what God is doing, we will have a chance to 10 years, 12 years from now, celebrate and build on what God continues to do. Now, I mentioned the rocks earlier, and here's what we're going to do this year with this, is there are these rocks that were placed up here as part of a way to make this space work. And so we're gonna scoop some of these rocks, and instead of just throwing them out, they're going to be in all of our campuses here as part of our year-end celebration. And what we're gonna ask you to do is take this and write a name or two or three or four on this of somebody that God has placed on your heart. Maybe they're already part of the ministry like I did years ago when I wrote my own kids' names on the rock, and I just prayed for my kids for years and what God would do in and through the church in their lives. Maybe it's that, or maybe there's people who aren't yet part of the church that you say, I would love to have you be a part. God, I'd love to have you work in their lives. And then I would just like to say we're going to do this in reverse today. Instead of throwing the rocks down, we're going to tell you to take the rock home and keep it. Put it somewhere where you'll come across it, maybe in the little well in your car, maybe on your desk, maybe in your bathroom where you brush your teeth, where you'll just be reminded to pray and to hope and to dream what God may do in this person's life. We're going to hear a little more about each location, each campus, each opportunity that's in front of us right now, but I wanted to just show you where God has worked and where we dream God will work at our Wexford campus, and hear a little bit more about some of the opportunities that are coming. Thanks for being here this year and for your investment.